Ṣẹ̀kẹ̀rẹ̀ lọ bá jó, ṣẹ̀kẹ̀rẹ̀ lọ bá jó, olúwa mi ò dìde ojó ṣẹ̀kẹ̀rẹ̀.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Theory Forge. Thank you for joining us for another Sunday night conversation on mmorpgs. I am Phantom X, joined as always by Diggs and legendary Neurotoxin. How are you two doing?
Great.
Doing all right. Hope the power doesn't shut off. It has been hot as hell.
Yeah, reason 102 why I don't understand why anyone lives in California, but... so we are here to talk about New World. We did sort of a preview. Gosh, a preview. Now this is sort of like a preview review.
Yeah.
So I think all three of us have played it. Mm-hmm. My guess is, Neuro, you've probably played it more than the rest of us. I think you actually had a group you were playing with. So
I was playing a little bit with some folks here and there, but not a whole lot of coordinated sort of stuff, partially because while they have half an MMO quest system, it's not the same quest from the same people, and you can't go to the next town over and get that version of the same quest. So I wasn't doing the same quest as everyone else because we started in different places, and we were different places along in the quest line, and there were different NPCs we had to interface with. So, like, the one theme park element they didn't even get right, which was being able to quest with your buddies and do the same content.
Yeah,
not too hard to run.
And I'll say it's pancake batter, not pancakes, not finished product.
I did that with Diggs, and actually ID, who just joined us. We kind of ran over to Diggs in his starting area, had some quests to do there.
Yeah.
It's a long, well, it wasn't actually, it's kind of a semi-long run. Anyways, we're kind of pulling away from the conversation. So.
Not really, no, it was okay, but, not as good as it could be. I can see how it would be frustrating for Neuro. Especially if you're doing a bunch of people instead of just one person.
And it felt like you're supposed to do the quest to get the experience, that the experience you got from crafting and from killing things was kind of abysmal compared to the huge chunks you would get from questing, which that's also counterintuitive to me. Quests would be nice to, move things along and maybe teach you things, but for the most part, I want most of my experience for the things I do that actually affect the game world, things that, build the supply line, build up my resources, build up, equipment, and of course, killing things, because there's enemies that need to be destroyed and apparently herds that need to be culled.
No.
Is the phrase they used.
You shouldn't be getting most of your experience just from killing stuff. But questing is supposed to give you a bunch of experience so that you're not just, piecemealing yourself. What did we used to call it back in the day? Crap, I'm forgetting the name of it because I haven't talked about it in so long. But where that's just dredge work. The quests came along in order to give you a bulk of lore and stuff, so you aren't just doing 5 XP here, 5 XP there, 10 XP there. You're supposed to get like 50 for doing something interesting.
Maybe so. I guess for me, I go from the perspective that it's an arbitrary grind. Getting to level 50.
Grinding, that's what I'm talking to. The grind, yeah. So if all you're doing is getting 5 XP here and 5 XP there, that is a grind. You want to do something that's going to give you a big pop, and that's what quests are supposed to do. So you're not just grinding your way through.
Right, but what I'm saying is the 1 to 50 grind to then be a competent, top level character that can.
The 1 to 50 should not be a grind. That's the point.
It shouldn't be there. I don't think.
No, 1 to 50 should be there, but it should not feel like a grind. That's why you have
No.
quests.
I disagree with that. I go with more of the planet side model. Sure, there are level ups that show
Is
how much
Planet Side RPG?
there are RPG elements to it.
But it's a FPS, right?
It is.
It's
That's
getting
right.
story.
So that's the
It's-
difference.
It's a 3-way factional battle with territory control and resource management.
Yeah, but it's an FPS with RPG elements. It's not an RPG.
So this is a third-person shooter with melee. It's, we can
Well,
parse words here.
No, but I'll go with you. That would be one of my complaints about New World and why I only played pretty much that one day, because it's not enough of an RPG.
For me, it's that they need to pick a lane. I'm looking at it, and the write-up that I did was more looking at it along the lines of trying to improve the PvP factional warfare experience, but then in doing so, make the PvE experience actually exploring the dungeons and diving in and getting the lore and getting the fancy resources and artifacts that are going to empower your faction. That's something that's done behind the front line. So you've got your PvPers and the supply line of PvEers that are giving them their resources, but at the same time, the PvE folks, when there's territory that's safe enough because the front lines are being managed, they can actually go and dive in and find all the really cool stuff. So that's more the way I would see it, where instead of having to grind to get to level 50 so you're at the highest level of power and you can use the same, the highest level equipment, that everybody starts fairly competent and fairly well off, that instead of starting at what's currently an attribute of 5 in each slot, you start maybe with 50 in each slot. And there's a small progression that you can get from slowly from leveling over time, but it's very, very, very slight, not this
So
big
again,
ramp.
you're conflating leveling with grinding.
Well, I'm saying it should, if you start off like
You're saying
pretty
there's no
good.
reason to level, is what you're really saying, but that's not the same thing as grinding.
Well, grinding is going to be different if you have to manage resources in a supply line.
I'm just saying grinding, the grind is when you're doing the tiny little minutia stuff and you don't have enough quests to give you boost. That's the grind. What you're talking about is leveling, and you're just saying leveling to 50. You don't really want to do that in any case. You should just start off basically without having to worry about leveling and just have a bunch of abilities. But those
Start as
two
a
things
badass.
are different. I'm
Like,
just saying those two things are different.
I'm saying you can keep skill progression, you can keep gear progression, but get rid of
That's not
attribute
grinding.
progression.
That's all I'm saying. That's still different. That's leveling. But I agree with you to some extent that, but this game was not supposed to be that. It was supposed to be more focused on PvP. And that's part of the problem. So yeah, I wish the questing was more interesting and more fun, and that you'd get more stuff than just sword and axe and what were the others, dagger and polearm.
It was
and shield,
sword and board, one-handed axe that you for some reason used two-handed, a warhammer that was two-handed. You've got the bow, the musket, which was actually a rifle because it's got a cartridge and everything. Sure, you can call it a musket because it fires a ball. It's a freaking rifle. You're not sitting there for a minute loading it with powder, ramming the ball down. It's not a musket. So it's got all of, and then there's the fire staff and the life staff. I would imagine, I don't know if they had it in, but there was the those shock bulb things. I would imagine that's what you would use for the like a lightning staff later on when they get that far.
Mm-hmm. Oh, the life staff they do have, right?
Yeah, the life staff was kind of fun because I think it did like cold damage to enemies, but it healed your buddies if you shot them.
Mm-hmm.
And that was the one that had the speed dash in it. So it was, well, if you got to get from point A to point B, get to level 2 in life staff. That way you can just zoom around.
Yeah, lots of people are using that. It seemed to be fairly essential if you want to stay with groups from what Immaculate Deception was telling us, I think, when we played. And but Phantom was not particularly pleased with the actiony aspect of it, that you had to aim.
Well, I mean,
And
I
it was
think,
not particularly accurate as one would like it to be.
yeah, I think that's something that's going to, I keep talking about PvE, the content part to this, but that's the other part is the combat being tailored more to a PvE crowd. I think it works super well for PvP, but it sort of has the same problem that I experienced with Crowfall when you're especially using sort of spell casting type things in an action combat environment. Even if you just have a little bit of lag or any animations are off, or if it just feels just even the smallest bit off, it just ruins the whole experience.
The staffs were really bad about that because I don't think they actually coded any girth to the projectile, and so you still had to be pinpoint precise with something that appeared to be a much larger sort of thing that would give you a little bit of leeway, and a near miss would still hit sort of thing. I just kept bouncing around bunnies. I put the damn thing in the crosshairs, pull the trigger. Nope. Finally, I just go over and smack it with my axe. Musket and rifle didn't have that, or the musket and the bow didn't have that problem. The stabs were the only ones that had that issue for me.
The big Warhammer also was sort of a, I initially was trying to play with it. Looks cool. It's huge.
Terrible. I was watching you play with it. It's like, I am never using that weapon.
Yeah, it's so slow. And again, the way it feels, and it might be entirely, I didn't get to the PvP portion. I did not get to that level. I just sort of, I put in chat once we got kind of halfway through. It's like, this game, why am I dumping 30 hours into something that in 5 days time will no longer exist and will be wiped and will be a completely different game when we actually get to play it. So, at that point, I kind of quit, but so it might work. Actually, some of I can't remember the name of the streamer. She was like the top New World streamer, and I cannot remember who it was, but New World, their Twitter retweeted her quite a bit, but her pictures at least, I think, had a Warhammer. So it just felt very clunky.
Did you get any of the weapon skills in it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the first thing I did with all of them was to get just so I had more than just a simple swing.
Yeah.
Before I actually did stat stuff.
Yeah. It seemed like for some of them, if you didn't have the abilities, you were just sitting there getting your ass kicked. Firestaff, if you didn't have the flamethrower, what are you even doing? You should just tag enemies that other people are hitting and get some of that experience off of it till you're tough enough to actually use the Firestaff on your own, because that was ridiculous. I imagine the Warhammer was maybe a bit of the same thing, but you said you got the abilities and still kind of sucked. It still looked cumbersome. It seems like a game where speed is king because you can do some amount of like a stun distant interrupt or something, distraction, by hitting things more and more. That's why the axe was so great for most situations. You didn't have the same maybe sort of defense that the shield would have, whatever. You still got a block. That's not an issue. You get in there with that axe, just big old hits coming really fast. Multiple times I would come across an enemy that out-leveled me, and it wouldn't do anything against me because I am just attacking it. No special moves, just getting it kind of stun-locked in its rhythm with the axe attacks. So there was that, and then if you played the sword and board right, you could keep somebody pretty well locked down. You'd be, distracting, giving them the stuns with your basic attacks. Then you've got your shield bash and I think it was a shield charge and another one that you basically had things you could keep cycling to keep knocking the person down and keeping them off balance. And if it was a 1v1 situation, you were able to pretty well dominate somebody if they couldn't get away.
So is this being marketed as an MMORPG, or are they calling it something else?
Yes. That's a good question. I'm actually going to look at the sales page right now to get your answer.
I think that's what yeah.
I think it is too. I mean, it felt more like Ark to me.
Well, so here's the thing, and here's what I think will be interesting. They didn't say this. I mean, to me, it seems pretty straightforward. You know, they missed their target twice. People are starting to get upset with them. This, of course, is after
Their target release date.
Yeah, and this is, of course, after they had made such a big change from PvP, introducing PvE. That, to me, preview is just sort of a way to get people to feel better about where they're at, right? You come play it. You know, so a lot of what we talk about, I feel like, is not probably representative of the final game. And what's interesting to me is I actually think preview went very well for them. You know, everything seemed to go very well. People seemed to generally like it. You know, they had a lot of big streamers that seemed to have had fun playing it. So now I'm sort of like, okay, I feel like preview was put in as a way just to calm people down, as a peace offering because of missing their dates. Knowing that they're going to add in a whole lot more before they release. But now it's sort of like, what do? People actually enjoy what they just played. So do you continue going on with your changes? Or
I mean, considering some of the recent hiring and stuff they've been doing, I think they did a little bit of this as, like you were saying, something to kind of reach out and be like, hey, we know you're bummed that we pushed the date back, so here's a chance to play a little. I understand it's also been a huge feedback opportunity, not just on a technical level, seeing how it holds up with all of the users and all of their disparate internet connections and the hardware and all of that sort of fun stuff. But then also actually being able to see what players do, where they stop, what they continue doing, how they grind, you know, all of that sort of stuff. Tons of data without even asking us. Then, of course, all the streamers and all the posts and all the feedback from surveys and stuff, they have gathered, I'm sure, an insurmountable amount of data that is going to take some people a while to parse through to be able to get the you know, all the length and breadth of. But I'm pretty sure they use this as an opportunity to get as much information about the customer as they possibly can, because that's the sort of people they're going, you know, they are. That's what they do. They're Amazon. They want to know what our trends are. They want to know what we're doing, what we're buying, what we're getting into. So it makes perfect sense.
Oh, they don't have
a
enough
game level studio too.
They don't have enough to. I don't think they have enough to do in that. Well, maybe because I'm just not interested in doing the stuff that they have. To me, they don't have enough stuff in there to get that information about what people are interested in, which could seg me into why I'm still not really interested in the game. But what did you find? Are they marketing as a MMORPG? What are they saying?
I'm not actually seeing, like, on the Amazon sales page itself, just to buy it from their store, they don't make a clear declaration. They don't say it's a survival game, it's a war game, it's an MMO. They talk about things you do in the game, but they don't say what it is. And I think that might be a really smart move on their part.
Yeah, I mean, going in, it feels a lot. Oh, I guess maybe because it looks to me like going to the beach and doing stuff around these beaches, and there's other people who could be gathering resources and building stuff up, and, you know, building their bases and all that stuff. Reminds me of Ark a lot. You also have one quest person.
Yeah. Well, at the starting zone, there's one quest person. As you get on, there's other ones.
But still, that goes again. I think that so much is going to change. Like, I think the only things that are going to clearly stay the same, right? So the 3 factions. I think that the way they're doing their 50v50, that will probably stay the same. They might tweak it, but I think that will stay the same. Also, the rifts, the at least the larger battle ones, that will probably stay the same. I think everything
Considering
else.
the guy who designed rifts is now working on it, yeah, I think they're going to do something with it.
Yeah, everything else, who knows? Like the weapons, that could all change. You could add. You could hopefully have more. I mean, that's such a small collection to choose from, or at least different types of the different kinds. That's why I kept seeing tweet and YouTube video after YouTube, you know, how to reach max level and how to do this and how to do that. And New World's like, why are you spending the time to do this? In 10 days, it's going to be worthless. You know, someone watches this a year from now, it's going to have no meaning because the game is still being developed.
If you're a streamer or a YouTuber, it's everything. You have to
I know
do
it's
that.
money,
Like,
but
so if you've got an obligation, then of course you have to do it. And if you're, invested in a streamer or YouTuber and you
I
like
know.
hanging out with them or something, you're probably going to do it too. People have free time. They get into stuff. It's fine.
Well,
I don't know. It just goes to my point that a lot of this, everyone's, I don't think, has lost sight of the fact that this is really just like a token offering of sorry that we messed up. Here you go. Play this for 10 days. It's going to change dramatically. So,
Yeah. We'll see what they do in November.
It's like even our opinions, I don't know how meaningful they are because we don't know what it's going to be like 6 months from now.
Yeah, I'm still trying to get some feedback from you guys into like how you enjoyed the kind of concept. So for me, this kind of reminds me of the Thomas Covenant series of books that was out when I was a young man in my 20s. It's European, it's kind of Tolkien-esque, but low fantasy. So I'd go through each book going, okay, where's the magic? Okay, where's the magic? There's supposed to be a magic ring, but nothing happens. It's like more historical fantasy than the high fantasy that I want to experience. So this has more drawbacks. I mean, not as much as before. It didn't feel like we were colonizing a place. It felt more like we shipwrecked somewhere and we're doing some stuff and there's some zombies running around, but I'm not sure why I want to kill these zombies because they're not really coming into us. We're going over to them. And so one, I'm not really super keen on playing Europeans. Or a culture based on European culture. I'd rather play something based on a different culture. And that being said, if I'm playing an RPG, I would rather it be highly science fiction or highly magical instead of being stuck in 17th century or 16th, 15th century, 18th century, whatever those time periods are with a European focus. And when it comes to skills, I'd rather do something other than combat. So, like, I was playing with Phantom X and Immaculate Deception and going over to kill these undead, and got killed pretty quickly because a bunch of them ganged up on me. Normally, I would play some kind of stealth individual, so I would be using stealth magic or something to sneak by them instead of attack them directly. So there's stuff that I would prefer to do in the game that this game just doesn't offer, and I hear that they're going to be adding magic in or more magic in later, but that means for me right now, this doesn't have the stuff that I would be looking for in an RPG that I'd be interested in playing. So I'm wondering, and there's this, I'm not really into this survival thing, and I guess it's not survival since we didn't have to really drink or eat or all that stuff, but the gathering of resources to make your stuff, that crafting thing, I don't know, it was okay.
That crafting thing.
I mean, the typical survival game version of crafting is what seemed to be implemented here to some degree.
Except one quirk that I absolutely hated, that when you get to a real crafting facility, you couldn't do your campfire crafting anymore. You couldn't make flint arrows at a normal station. It's like, nope, you got to go outside, you got to pop a tent down or a campsite down or find one of the other 50 ones that somebody else has already put down, and then you can make your crappy arrows or your crappy wooden sword.
So I'm still wondering, like, why would I play this game? That's what I'm wondering. And how do you guys feel about that coming in?
I think because they haven't implemented the RPG component, the PvE. To me, I guess when I think of PvE, I inherently think also like some sort of role playing. I know that doesn't have to be the case, but in this instance, I think the two will come together. They just don't have that in there yet, and who knows how long that will take. What you just saw is what alpha has been. That was the alpha state of the game.
So Immaculate Deception says the base mechanics of the game I think are really good, but that's problematic for me because I'm not really a gamer. I don't play RPGs for the game part of that. I play it for the role play part of that. Um, and there's just not enough role play elements in here for me, or not the kind of role play that I want to play.
Yeah, I mean, to answer your question, if they released it right now, no, Diggs, I would not expect that you would play this. This is not your game.
No, I wouldn't either.
Yeah.
If it was releasing today and I knew that there wasn't a massive overhaul coming later down the road, despite it being called release, I don't think I would continue with it either.
Yeah, like what has me interested in Shadowlands for World of Warcraft, and I actually kind of enjoyed Battle for Azeroth because I was focused on the new Zandalari trolls that's based on Latin American culture, Mesoamerican culture, and so the culture there really captured me. I wasn't going into Tudor style housing and all of that. I was going into this, Mesoamerican culture, and it felt like I was in a space that I would want to occupy, which doesn't capture me by European flair. And then going into Shadowlands, we're kind of getting away from the typical factions that we've had and moving into even different cultures. And I get to play, and appear like an African American, which I did actually like. The character creation was pretty good. I could get something reasonably to myself, which I think is important when you're starting to let people in, because I don't want to play a white guy or a white woman, because I'm not that. I do see some potential in adding other cultures down the road. But I haven't played Civ in 20 years. Last time I played Civ, I was actually working on the game at Activision. But my problem with Civ at that time, and I think it's probably still the same today, is that the goal was always to get to space. So no matter what other culture you're starting in, you're really trying to play Western culture and have Western values and Western technology. And so if, say, down the line, New World introduced Polynesian culture, how would that be different than the European culture? How would their combat be different? I would hope that they would be instilling some form of magic, and how would their magic be different than European magic? That's the stuff that would interest me and kind of maybe get me to explore this game a little bit more. But right now, it's just, we go into this game and we have to kill these undead, and I'm thinking, why do we have to kill them? Like, maybe I would want to use voodoo and have them kill other people, or have them kill other things. I'd rather control and manipulate the undead rather than destroy them. So that's the kind of thing. We're kind of coming in with this very westernized view, and I would want other stuff.
I get you.
And I think right now, if it released, I would probably, it's a game, it plays well as far as the hardware, the connection, I didn't have any server drop-offs. The game looks amazing visually. It's something I'd probably play at least until 50. Beyond that, I don't know.
Okay.
I probably would not do the 50v50 stuff. So obviously, if that was all they had, probably would drop off unless there was something within crafting. I'm still curious about the never-ending crafting, but
what is it you want to craft?
Well, I mean, there's a lot of different stuff, and there's a lot of randomness to it too. But
yeah, but what? So name some stuff that you want to craft.
I mean, everything they do. I mean, you can do it. Everyone can be everything. So starting off with weapons, with salves to potions. Probably the least interested I would be in the furniture type stuff. That's probably the least.
What do the potions give you?
I mean, it depends. Your mana, your health, defense against certain types of things.
Yep, there were other consumables, foods, and stuff
Yeah.
that would give you defense against different things, give you different crafting bonuses.
Yeah, it does point out there. I mean, there are some benefits to furniture's making. It's just not what I would find interesting. I actually got stuck in preview room. I will take that back. I mentioned there was no problems with the server. So two things actually. Three. There's a lot of clipping. A lot of clipping everywhere. So I don't know how they'll go about fixing that, but that was everywhere.
You mean camera clipping or
Yeah.
all clipping?
Camera, looking through mountains as you're up against the mountain. I
paused for one of those that killed me during the stream. Yeah.
I did. You could actually view a room before purchasing, and so I did that. Got stuck, couldn't get out. Had to kill myself to get out. A reload of the game didn't work, so I had to kill myself, take the durability hit, and that got me out. And the unstuck didn't work either. So I had to end up killing myself. And then the third thing, actually, there was I was kind of coming up over a mountain ridge from the back side of how you were supposed to enter an area. Kind of looking down, and the entrance is across from me. And I'm supposed to be coming in that way, but I thought, okay, I'll slide down the mountain and kind of come in from behind. And seemed to have done that. Like came down, stopped on the ground, and then couldn't move forward. Couldn't see anything though, and I was actually in. Like it looked fine. I could see players running back and forth. It didn't look like it was clipping. I started moving left and right, and then it started to clip, and then it was like, oh, I'm stuck in the mountain. I was actually literally stuck in the mountain. Couldn't move. I could run kind of back left and right. Again, unstuck didn't work. Logging in and out didn't work, so I had to kill myself a second time to get out. But
and then.
But it is an alpha. I mean, that's the other thing is I don't think people understand with the preview. I was in the second phase of alpha, and this was basically. I mean, this is alpha. That's what you just got to play.
Yep. And then what about the hubs? Once you got moving into the towns or whatever, what did you think of the towns? Nothing.
Going back to the idea that I don't think there should be any love between factions and it should be a three-way factional war for territory control. Settlements don't make sense to me. They should be forts, and more forts, and just be fortified places where you do battle stuff, you prep your supplies, you make your equipment, but not a hangout place and not where you live. I prefer more of the PlanetSide 1 approach where each faction has their own sanctuary that's a different place, that's off of the main battlefield area, that you can hang out with your factional buddies and do faction stuff together and, get ready. PlanetSide 1, you would get all of your vehicles and stuff together and ride, into battle with it. It wouldn't make sense something like that here. This is more where you would kind of hang out at home, maybe have different rest bonuses than if you rested at a fort in the game or something. One of the main reasons for it, though, is I want to do everything possible to remove the persistence of players in the world such that when you log into the game, you're not logging into the last place you were in case that place has too many people in it, it's overrun by another faction, it's now taken over by enemy forces that no faction controls it. And to remove all the ambiguity of that by just having you start in this more neutral, like, you're on the sanctuary, and from the sanctuary you get one free Azoth teleport to one of the forts, either on the front line or one back from the front line or something. So that way you can kind of deploy into an area where you've got controlled territory. With the sanctuary, it would be very specially divided and instant sort of housing. I want to say it was the Realm that did this, where it was basically your home is on a block. You can't really access your other neighbors other than maybe seeing their decorations. But once you walk off of that block, you're walking into a different small server instance with somebody else's homes and maybe the decorations there. And so it's not necessarily something that needs to be physically represented. You never need to see the actual like castle walls, for example. You're just in the residential neighborhood part of the sanctuary, and maybe you get a cart that will take you to more of like the common area if there's going to be one.
I think that's one of my problems too, is that I mean, where I went, the towns I went to were not memorable. I mean, maybe because they were forts,
Yeah.
um, but they didn't seem special. It wasn't like, oh my God, this looks so amazing. I want to spend time here. And just trying to navigate where everything was, especially through the quest line, that felt clunky as hell. And maybe it's because they originally thought that players were going to be building places. Um, I don't know, but it's those aren't towns that would want to call home and hang out in, really.
No. In fact, if they didn't have all the houses in the way, you could actually get between all of the crafting structures a little faster, which is really all I'm there for.
Right.
So, having a little bit here and a little bit here and a little bit here, that's cute for trying to infuse the story of this place and how it was built, but that's irrelevant. Concentrate all of the crafting stations like like World of Warcraft, like they would have in the capitals way back in vanilla. Because when you want to craft, you want the storage box and all of the crafting stations, and maybe a mailbox if you're the sort of game that has one, and the auction house. Just put them all in one damn place, so you can get all of your business, all of your trade stuff done at once. Then get back out on the battlefield, or get back out to your adventure with your friends.
How did you feel about it, Phantom? Yeah.
I still don't understand the towns themselves. I mean, I guess I agree with the idea of kind of housing everything together. It's kind of strange, but just the whole idea again, and we talked about this actually the first time we kind of went over New World. The whole idea that a faction owns control of a town, but the other two factions can just come freely and do as they please, use the equipment, apparently do quests within the town to cause subterfuge so that they can come in and take over the town, and even sign up on a board in the town to take over the town. I just don't understand the rationale. To me, it seems like if one faction has control of one area, if you don't belong to that group, or if you clearly belong to I guess you have to belong to one of three. I don't know why there's not sort of a kill on sight kind of thing to that.
Yeah,
I guess I don't understand. I just don't understand why you have fighting over the towns when it doesn't seem to afford any benefit other than getting to direct what gets built, the taxes that come in.
I mean, with the design they presented, one faction could rule the entire world, and it would still be arbitrary.
Yeah, it would
be arbitrary.
And I don't. Now I'm not a PvPer, so ultimately it doesn't really matter to me. I don't care as long as I can come in and use a crafting station. That's all I care about, right?
Right.
I'll probably pay attention to who has higher taxes, and avoid the ones that are the highest. But otherwise, I could care less. Even though I belong to a faction, I could care less which faction owns which town, as long as I have access to what I need.
I just want to jump in real quick. We were talking about crafting and types of crafting in chat, and Forum says jewelry crafting has a number of problems, and the main point is that craft items do not have any dependence on, I think, gear score. Which is kind of fascinating. I mean, I don't know enough about jewelry crafting to know how those are supposed to help you. I guess you slot them into your armor and weapons. Yeah, I mean, jewelry crafting seems like it would have some interest to me. I think it was EverQuest 2. I had my main character relied on uh, jewelry crafting from an alt character for all of her armor. So she wore rags even up through level 80 to 100, and got all of her armor. Her gear score was all from jewelry crafting that a different alt made for her. Um, but so I could kind of see how that could be, you know, something interesting in New World. But how it applies to gear score, that it doesn't apply to gear score, that seems kind of wild. But that could be because they're just still, working on that. It's alpha, so maybe they just haven't added that part in there. But yeah, these factions. So yeah, maybe they need to do more with the factions coming up. Maybe even on the PvE side, maybe even have different crafting foci on for each faction.
That would be a thing. It'd be nice to actually see a some sort of attempted asymmetric balance. And no, I say those words cautiously because the last two examples of that, they never really got it at all, and sometimes things just got worse instead of better.
Yeah, and I don't know if it needs to be a balance, but even just different. I mean, like mechanical balance. I mean, in terms of PvP or something like that. But just even again in terms of cultural interest, or subcultural interest, focus on different stuff. Well, how does the town change other than taxes if a different faction takes it over? If we're thinking Ashes of Creation, would they build different buildings? Like what is it that really makes them different that would have an impact other than, this is why we want to fight each other? How would that cause us want to fight each other? Like in Ashes of Creation, I think of one way I think race affects that is, um, even if it's just a hatred of a different race. If you're a dwarf and you hate elves, and the next thing you know, you've moved from stage 2 to stage 3, and it used to be a dwarven town, and now it's an elven city. I can see how that would push you to some PvP and want to get your town back. What is it like? Because all of the architecture has changed. You might have quest lines that have changed. The types of buildings might be different.
Yeah, I mean, factional goals it makes sense to have different. Like the factions are different because they have different goals. That's written on the surface what they're about.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, let's do that then. So the rule by might folks, they would be about controlling a territory by force, walling it off, claiming it as theirs. The religious fanatics, they want to reconsecrate as much like holy sites and otherwise that they can and dedicate as much as they can. So their idea is maybe not necessarily taking an area over and walling it off so much as locating the various sites where there's the highest concentrations of force that they can then convert to their faction's holy energy or whatever and use to purge the sinners or whatever they're up to. And likewise, the syndicate, they should be out there. They should be the stealthy ones trying to find information, going into little lost vaults and, caches and stuff like that. And they get their progress by finding old relics and artifacts and texts and things like that and trying to unravel the mystery of the world, because that's what they're there for. They're not there to rule it. They're there to understand it. And I don't know, maybe try to keep the other two from being able to get a hold of that stuff and rule the rest of the world with it. So that seems like it should be part of what's really driving the factional struggles, what the factions exist for to begin with on paper, like their actual stories.
Yeah, there's a when Phantom and I were playing, Phantom and I in Immaculate Deception, when we were playing and I was getting over to the undead, they started talking about the life staff. because I was like, why do I have to destroy these things? Maybe I don't want to destroy them. Maybe I want to cure them. And Phantom started saying, hey, we've got this life staff. You can cure people with it. I'm like, no, I want to cure the undead with it. So can I bring them back to life? And even if I couldn't do that with the life staff, if there was some holy lands that we had consecrated, could I in like there's a area in Battle of Azeroth for the Zandalari where there's ghosts, and I think you run the ghosts over to consecrated land and they go up into the heavens. So even if I'm destroying them by sending them to heaven or sending them to the afterlife, can I run them over someplace and feel like I'm curing them? Are there places that I have to consecrate in order for me to be able to do that? Those are things that I would like to get into that makes me feel like I'm part of a different faction, and then being a part of that faction has some impact, and it's not all just kill, 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 be great at a sword or be great at a battle hammer or something. I mean, that's just, I mean, I like it if some people are into that, but I like diversity, so I don't want everybody to be into that.
Yeah, definitely.
So what else did you have in mind, Neuro? I know you had read up quite a bit, so...
Yeah, so I mean, for me, one of the things, it's going to be a big shocker. I don't think money at all should be a thing that you're spending except on personal upgrades and like residential upgrades and stuff like that. I don't think gold as a sink for your repairs. I don't think gold is a sink for your taxes. I don't think gold as a sink for how you upgrade resources and facilities is really meaningful or worthwhile. I come from the perspective that, yes, every ship that comes over to this island does end up getting wrecked, but even with that, every faction came over here more than well funded, and they continue getting a trickle of supplies from poor wayward folks that have been recruited and are coming in on the next ship that's doomed. That all the factions are well funded, that you don't have to buy your equipment, that you don't have to pay a trickle out of your pocket to use these things, that you're there as a soldier of that faction. You are constantly accruing battle pay or utility pay for whatever it is that you're doing, so long as you're doing something productive. If you're out there fighting, you're not getting gold off of enemies. You're being paid into your character's personal bank account for, killing the enemies. You're taking out other players, taking out monsters, taking out creatures, and then bringing back their crafting resources. Part of that, I believe, is also really, again, making it a game about building and managing supply lines. The idea of defense being a matter of controlling a territory and being able to build and defend front lines. Being able to build up walls, being able to build up watchtowers that actually give you a bonus on spotting people who are crawling or crouch walking or whatever. Being able to do things where you're actually setting up the pathways of battle in a way that's advantageous for you. That's what makes sense to me. Now, you can't just do that overnight, and then once you've got it set up, you have to maintain it. So for me, I actually also double down on the idea of there being a respawn resource that's required. Now, the little rations and potions that you carry is one thing, but I was considering more the idea of like a big full sit-down meal, like pots of stew and like, kegs of mead and ale and stuff, that those are actually your forward base respawning resources that you have to keep making nice meals and making, big old batches of drink and continue supplying the front lines with these so people can keep respawning as they need to during a conflict. Or if there isn't a conflict in that area and they've got a stockpile, they can start spreading it to the areas where is a conflict, and they then become part of the supply chain instead of being the front line. So that's really a lot more of what I would hope to see with it. And a lot of this is taking cues from the game Foxhole, which is not three-way factional. I believe it's just a two-way factional, but it's very much like a sandbox PvP game. You're building your walls, you're building your fort, You're getting your supply drops and you're driving them to the front lines. You manually have to drive a truck to get the things that respawn people to the front lines. And so in terms of a PvP game, that's the way I see it working. And now this goes back to what I was saying earlier. Once you've got your front lines established, once you've got the places where the battle's going on, there's maybe going to be a trickle here and there of stragglers. But for the most part, PvE groups that are out there mass harvesting, that are out there taking on the factional quest objectives, that are taking on the rifts, that they're able to exist and they're able to do the PvE thing because the PvP front lines are protecting their asses, and that they're at the very least able to throw enough forces at it that there's stalemates and there isn't too much action, so there isn't constant incursion, or it gets to the point where you're starting to get overwhelmed a little. Maybe both factions want to piece you from two different angles. So the PvE people have to kind of stop doing dungeon runs and have to start getting back on the supply line, or maybe even join the front lines for a moment. That's really more kind of the vision I have for the game.
Yeah, I mean, and again, maybe that's part of the problem is if PvE is just there to support PvP, I'm not really interested in PvP, so then I'd have a low interest in the game.
There should always be PvE opportunities. Like if any faction is down to their last place, of course it's going to be all out, all hands on deck PvP. But then at the same time, you have the entire faction coming out of one small area. They're going to start kicking people over pretty quickly because you've got a giant concentration of forces against what's likely a widespread sort of force that's, maybe taken over the area. There's also obviously the idea that I don't think adjacency is required. So you could potentially try to, be backhacking, trying to get into bases that aren't adjacent to yours to try to sow chaos there and pull people off the front lines to go to those spots. Again, giving more opportunity for PvE players to do their thing far away from where the actual battle's going on.
Right, but I think PvP people don't understand the mindset of PvE. So especially, right, I'm a Care Bear. So in real life, that means I'm a conscientious objector. You can't say, okay, you don't want to fight people, so just build the bombs that are going to kill people, because I don't want to kill people. That's the whole point. So just me supporting you doing the fighting when I don't really want there to be, I'm not really into the fighting in the first place. That just doesn't really do much for me. Now, if I'm into other stuff, if the PvE stuff is really interesting and then PvP is going to get in the way of me having fun with PvE, there might be reason for me to want to jump into the example that I used from EverQuest Next is when they said you have to kill the dryads, I think it is, in order to siphon their energy and use it to bolster your stealth magic. And I'm like, oh, okay, I'm not really into killing trees or dryads, but if I have to do that to increase my stealth, I'll do that. And if some player comes along and tries to stop me from doing that, well, I might have to kill that player, but it's not because I'm interested in that PvP. I'm really interested in the PvE and bolstering my stealth. But if it's just, go kill these people or have these battles because they're of a different faction and I'm just supposed to support that fighting, I'm not interested in doing that.
I get you. I mean, to that extent, I just think about the story of why the character's there and what they're there to do to begin with. And I get this weird feeling that nobody's, armored up and getting on that ship and sailing over there because they are going to start a garden. You're going over there to participate in a factional struggle for this new world.
I thought you were just lost there. I thought you were out on the ship and somehow you get shipwrecked and you're lost there.
So then how are there the three established factions in every established town when you get there then? There has to have been some prior knowledge that there's a factional struggle going on and that you're, going into a very dangerous area.
Well, there could be factional interests, but what are those interests? That's kind of what what I want to know more of, and I don't know enough of
Yeah,
these.
we didn't really get any expression of that in the quest whatsoever, so I'm right there with you.
Mhm.
The initial cutscene shows they're going purposefully to stop the corruption. Well, there you go.
The corruption.
The corruption.
Hmm.
They come from the same country, and that's one of those things that we've kind of got trouble with. Is like this thing, this Bermuda Triangle-ish place that, for some reason, only the Europeans coming from the east are actually setting foot on here. That doesn't make sense to me. Come on. Yeah, so that I agree. Like that's one of the things that you and I think probably a lot of folks in general may want to see more of with that is more representation, more like racial and cultural representation, and not to do it in a crappy and token sort of way, like really doing a good job of representing what like a light, medium, and heavy style armor for a lot of different cultures would be like, and not to do it in a way where one is always going to be better than the other, trying to make sure to get away from best practices. But I think there could be slight differences in one race's or one culture's sort of not race culture, one culture's sort of top tier armor versus a different culture's sort of top tier armor. And that they give different advantages. They've got different disadvantages, just like in real life. There's reasons why you'd use one versus the other, whether it's the access to the materials and the amount of resources it takes to get everyone armed, or if it's basically being in a giant steel can that sure nobody's going to pry you out of it unless they take time and tools to actually pry you out of it, but you're not going to die in it. You're going to pass out in it and then get dragged off and ransomed later. Like that's I think it'd be interesting to really see a lot more different armor styles represented and how you use them and how you fight with them. There's this really cool type of shield that exists in the Philippines. You're not blocking arrows with it, but somebody thrusts at you with a weapon. It's these woven reeds. It kind of goes through, not into your arm, hopefully, and allows you to kind of twist it away and disarm somebody. Like, that's pretty awesome. I'd love to see something like that. We don't have a disarmed state. We don't have what happens if you temporarily take somebody's weapon. There was none of that. But then getting back to the idea of cultures and cultural representation and things around the world, like weapons and weapon variations and skill variations and stuff. You don't have to pick what culture you come from. I think that's something that they don't need to do. You can make some appearance-based choices, like the way you design your character, which I hope will be way more diverse and robust by the time it's November, and then again, whatever the next release is going to be. But like that's the one thing. You don't say I'm part of this culture, I'm part of that culture. It's that the analog for like you were saying, like maybe Mesoamerican style armors and equipment and stuff, like that's the sort of thing. There might be a certain name for it, certain materials go into it, has a certain sort of look to it. I can definitely see things that have their power partially because of magic, not just because of their structural state, and that could be again a cultural thing, that some cultures are maybe a little bit more attuned with magic than others. It's a thing they could do. There's definitely more people going into it than Europeans is, what I'm hoping to see.
Yeah, because right, like I speak Spanish, and Spanish is my second language. Japanese is my third. Russian is my fourth, and I borrow stuff from those cultures, those other cultures. It doesn't have to just be. And I'm hearing Polynesian might be the next one that gets focused on, and I'm not very interested in European culture, but Polynesian culture, I would jump in and explore that. That would actually very potentially get me very interested to explore the game. So it doesn't have to be based on race. Every race should be able to borrow stuff from any culture. So I agree with that.
Phantom X, did you have anything else you want to say on that? Otherwise, there was a subject that I didn't bring up in my writing that I kind of want to talk with you guys about real quick because we're getting towards the end.
No, go ahead. Yeah, because we are
distance of the world and fast travel. It felt like I could run all the way across the game world in maybe like an hour if I didn't get stopped up along the way. Probably a little bit longer than that. But I know people were talking about mounts and fast travel and that sort of stuff, and I'm not really sure if the game actually needs it. Either that or the game's way too damn small, which it could also be. Like, this could be, that we got an abbreviated version of the actual continent, and it's going to be much bigger, and they just made this teeny little version of it that fits the same proportions of the printed map just for this test. I don't know.
I think we've only seen a small portion. I mean, I think that's part of it. As ID put, they will probably get mounts.
World? Okay, cool.
Yeah, as we see more. And you can see that along the map. There's sort of clouded areas. I don't know that we know how much larger, but hopefully it's just a small portion. Because you're right. I mean, it did not take long. When Diggs created his character and we realized, he was not even close to us. He's like, I'm coming to him. Like, no, you're like 200. You're like 2 kilometers or 200, whatever it was. You're far away. I'll come to you. And it didn't really take long for me and ID to get there. And we were all 3 separate areas. No, I did not make a run from one end to the other, so I have no idea how long that would take. But
files in the install that pointed to mounts or work on mounts. I know someone who's interested in that sort of stuff.
Yeah, I've not looked in. It's not hard to look into them. They're just zip files, basically, if you're interested. They don't.
Yeah,
they
both
don't,
of those would be nice.
They don't end in that, but if you just pop them into any kind of 7-zip or something else, it'll open for you. I'm not familiar with Lumberyard or CryEngine, so as far as how to poke further through.
Yeah.
But,
yeah.
Mounts. I think I think for any game, especially if there's mounted combat. I mean, I'm fine with that. I think it's more and I'm trying to remember exactly how it worked. You did have more of a faster travel from end to end in place as well. I don't know about that.
I think you could use Azoth to some short hops, but that's a diminishing resource real quickly if you're trying to get around with it.
Yeah, I mean, as long as it's short, I think that's fine. We just have this conversation with Ashes as well. The idea of a larger jump, I don't know that I would be favorable of that to go from one end of the world to the other. But we will hopefully find out.
I mean, I guess that's either the blessing or the curse of the idea that I had about like a kind of sanctuary place that you go back to between your times on the battlefield, is that then somebody could potentially try to use that as a fast travel mechanism. And that could be a little unbalancing in that it just allows you to move a lot of forces from one place to another. It's probably, that's the biggest reason why fast travel needs to be curtailed as much as possible, because if you've got 200 dedicated fighters that are up and running and just smashing through places, the ability to relocate them from one zone to another at snap of the fingers, that's really powerful. So
but the ultimate goal of settlements, fast travel doesn't matter, right? Because it pulls you in as long as you're signed up. So open world PvP, sure, yeah. I mean that if you're trying to capture a goal, a target, but I don't know what, other than just fighting to be fighting, I'm not sure what you would be competing over, because the only goal or the main goal we know of right now are the settlements. So,
and I think that's something that's missing is things other than the 50v50 battles that force a lot of players to gather up and fight with one another.
Right,
Yep.
because that was one of the things again that I liked about the EverQuest Next concept is that not only would this, so I'd be siphoning off like it's like dark magic. I forget what the actual name of it was, but it's like the opposite of life magic, and or maybe I'd be siphoning off life magic from the dryads, taking it back to the dark elf territory, where they will transmute the life energy into some kind of dark magic that you then use that to infuse or power your stealth abilities. And so one of the goals of another faction, like druids maybe, might want to go over to the dark elf area and destroy those factories that are transmuting the life magic into dark magic. And so that's a reason to PvP. So that's another thing that I'd be hoping. What do each of these factions have that you would want to destroy as objectives, because it's going to affect your gameplay. Maybe if you don't destroy it, it's going to affect your gameplay negatively, so that gives you incentive to go in and destroy it. So again, I was going to kind of redirect that to ask again, the factions right now seem to just be flavor text.
Yeah, flavor text and a different symbol that means these people are your buddies and those people might not be if you flag PvP.
But other than that, it doesn't.
Other than that, you can walk into their town, you can teabag their NPCs. They're not going to do anything about it.
Yeah, but they're not doing anything differently. It's not going to affect your combat. It's not going to affect your crafting.
Correct.
The only thing would be taxes.
Yeah,
Mainly.
taxes.
Yeah. That's
I guess who those taxes go to, though. I'm not really like who actually gets the taxes at the end of the day.
That's a good question.
Conquered at last.
I'm not, I've not looked into the mechanics of the governor rule, whether that just simply means you get more choice, you get to do more with building things. I assume it's all goes to, does go to the settlement. That just means you get to build more defenses, whatever. Taxes go to the company who owns the city to their treasury. Because there were definitely people playing with that too when we were on. There were some that were set up to like 10% or something. Probably because people, one, didn't care, two, didn't notice, right? It's not, most games don't have a variable tax on crafting. So if you're not paying attention. And I'll be curious to see how coin does play out, because that was the other thing. And I cannot remember the name of the streamer. That was sort of the top person at the end of the preview. She tweeted out a picture, and it was like 1 million gold or something. It was some absolutely obscene amount of gold that had been amassed in 10 days. So now again, everything is sped up, but we'll see. Well, I think we are actually 10 minutes over. So anyone new that's joined us, we do this every week, every Sunday at the same time, 8 o'clock Central, 9 o'clock Eastern, 6 o'clock Pacific. We kind of alternate between shows, with the primary focus being Ashes of Creation. So, if you're new, join us again next week. We're also starting to do a little bit more with streaming, different kinds of games. I think I did Dual Universe last week, Magic the Gathering. So probably more Dual Universe this week. And maybe something we can talk about.
Yeah, you've got that super duper machine that I do not have. I think I only have 6 gigabytes of RAM, so I can't play.
Well, I will say the 2 hour stream, probably, 15 minutes of that was loading. So, anyways, more to talk about at a different time for a different game. So, everyone have a good week. And again, thanks for joining us. We appreciate it. So we will see you back here next week.
See you later, everybody.